All right, so for our latest project, we're going to be taking a look at this Kenwood Car Stereo. This is a model KRC-99. This is a viewer-submitted unit. This comes from John. He lives in Texas. He got in touch with me after seeing one of my other videos for another Kenwood car deck and asked me if I could take a look at this one for him. What he's saying is going on here is that the unit will not take a tape in, but I believe he said it will power up. So, of course, there's a few things that come to mind, and the major concern is always, will we run into a broken plastic gear of some sort that we would not be able to get a replacement for. So we'll find all that out once we get inside and get it opened up. Over to the left, it does come with the factory outboard tuner module, as well as a non-factory piece. This didn't come with the unit when it was new. It's a small 2-channel Kenwood amplifier he included with this. This is a head unit only. It has 2 sets of preamp out, so you have to have at least 1 amplifier in order to operate the radio. So as always, we'll come in, we'll take a quick tour of it just to see how it looks, and then we'll get it opened up and get started on it. As for our intro music this time, we're checking out the 2016 release by the band The Cult called Hidden City, and we're listening to one of my favorite tracks off this, Deeply Ordered Chaos. Let's check out a little bit of this, and then we'll get started on the Kenwood.
What you looking at? Who you dreaming of? What you leave behind? Child of liberty, open my eyes, defend Paris.
All right, let's come back in and we'll take a quick look at what he sent. Starting off first here with this small 2-channel amplifier. This is a model KAC-520, I guess it is. Yeah, KAC-520. Again, I don't believe this would have been included with the stereo when it was new from the factory. I believe this would have been bought after the fact. I did not get a wiring harness with this, so I don't know if that means he doesn't have it or forgot to send it. I did notice that we do have a cutoff DIN input connection there, but he did express interest in getting DIN to RCA conversion cables for the radio itself. So if we don't have a wiring harness for this, I'm sure we can put some hardline wires coming out. We'll just remove that connector and hardline some wires coming off the circuit board. As for the radio itself, beautiful piece, KRC-99. Highly sought after on the resale market, especially in working condition, I would imagine. And they have this listed here as a Kenwood KRC-99 hybrid component. The tape door actually acting as a display window. There's some LED segments there. It looks like maybe for tape running. See if we can get a little bit more light on that. Yeah, it looks like maybe for a tape running indicator. And then there's a numerical segment over to the right that's probably for the programmable music search. Right below that, we do have a hard reset button, and then a toggle up and down switch that's multifunction for fast forward rewind and for the tuning up and down. We have the band, play and program switch, attenuator to the right, and then audio control for up and down. Auto volume, I'm not sure what that's all about. We'll have to find that out once we get it up and get it working. And then we have 1 through 5 buttons here, multifunction again. for tape advanced, Dolby BNC, metal tape capability. REP, I'm going to assume is repeat for the tape maybe. And then INDS, some type of indicator. Again, totally guessing, we just need to look it up. Then over to the right of this EQ ANA switch, there is a station readout, frequency readout for the station. I would imagine that's what that is. And then the function selection, EQ, tuner, and tape. And there is a small drawer here. There's a button that says open and close, and there's a small drawer that comes out here, which apparently does have some type of EQ controls in it. He says that door does work. As for the radio itself, what you're going to get is a power supply module here, your 3 wires, constant 12, switch 12, and a ground. And then they're going to give you a second box, and this has both of your DIN connections for front and rear, and they have them listed there as preamp out front and preamp out rear. And then there's an auxiliary input on this. And if you don't have a means of getting an auxiliary input in the radio through the DIN connection, they do include a hardline 3.5 coming out of the radio that you can use. So a little forward thinking on their part from back in the day. The tuner module itself has a huge connector, and they give you a nice bundle of wire that you can use to hook this up and mount it under the dash. With all of these boxes, you might want to hope you're putting this into a Lincoln Town car. You're going to need that much cargo bay area inside the dash to accommodate all of this. So I think the first thing we probably want to do, let's go ahead and just get power applied to it, see what it will do and what it won't do, and then from that point we'll move on to the tape deck issues. So give me a moment for that and we'll pick back up. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. It's going to be a couple of weeks later since I did the initial couple of clips in the start of the video, and in that time I've had an opportunity to take a look at what limited information is available online about these radios. Could not find a service manual, but I was able to find a owner's manual for a similar model that had some hookup connection diagrams, which is going to give us a little more information than I had when I started. When I first started the video, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm going to be ahead of the game because I had made this nifty little adapter, DIN connector to RCA adapter for the other radio, thinking I was going to be able to use it here. But this is a 5-pin connection, and the ones on this radio are 8 pins. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to use that, but I was able to find this. This is a female PC mount DIN socket with 8 connections on it, so I should be able to do the same thing I did here using this, get a couple of RCA plugs and solder them onto the appropriate leads and get this going. A couple of other things. The auxiliary input here, it looks based on the wiring diagram I've seen. This is for a CD changer. For whatever strange reason, it appears as though the audio is only fed to the rear channels and not the front and rear channels. So I'm not sure if this is something we might be able to access. The customer does want to be able to use an auxiliary source with this, his phone or some type of Bluetooth adapter, so he can AirPlay his phone to the radio. So we'll have to see if that's something that we can access. I think in the initial clips I said this was an auxiliary input. That is absolutely not true. This is for an IR sensor for a remote control. So the radio could be operated remotely. If you have the credit card size remote that it showed that type of remote in the picture. And I don't know if that was something that would have came with the radio or you would have had to buy that after the fact. So I'll go ahead and show you what I know about getting the radio hooked up. Got it fed into the power supply here. Power supply is on. And this is what we get. Let me get my chair here so I can sit down. And this is what we get when we hit the tuner. There's a little buzzer module right here on the top of the tape cassette housing that makes beeping noises when you push buttons. So the FM frequency here, 76.1, and this radio did come from the Asian market, and it appears that it is made for their frequency, which I believe is 76.1 up to 90, which I think has been expanded now to 95. Again, this is information I didn't know. I had to learn this after finding out initially when I turned the radio on that why are we on 76.1? So it doesn't look to me, from what I have seen, there's any way to switch it. There's no flip switch on the bottom of the radio or on the side. Didn't see anything over here in the tuner module that would alert me to the fact that you can switch it over. It may be possible to do it, but I'm not seeing it. As for the tape, exactly as he said, if you try to put a tape in here, it'll start clicking and it will not accept the tape. So we know that we probably got some mechanism trouble going on there. So I think the first thing I probably want to do, I'm going to go ahead and pin this out. Should be the same as this one here, and get an adapter hooked up to it. And then from that point, we'll use little cheapy FM modulator I have. We might be able to send a signal into the radio through the tuner and see if we have some audio and see what will work and what won't work. This little drawer does work, opens up, and you have a variety of little controls here that are used for pretty much the equalizer and some other functions. So that is working as he said. So I think, like I said, the first step, let me go ahead and get this made up and we'll get this fed into the mixer and we'll see if we can receive anything on the tuner. And then from that point, we'll move on to the tape deck. But before we do that, I did notice that there is an issue with the display here. If you wiggle this circuit board, it kind of comes and kind of goes like there's some type of an intermittent connection there. So that is something we'll obviously be dealing with as well, trying to figure out what that is. But before any of that, let's make sure we can produce some audio through this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned out, get a cable made, and then I'll bring you back. All right, let's go ahead and come back in. It's going to be a couple hours later. Obviously, it didn't take 2 hours to put this adapter together, but I started chasing that intermittent display issue, and that led me to find a few loose connections on this board right here. As it turns out, that wasn't it. I had this board completely out, and I was soldering on the back side of it. There's through-hole traces. I was convinced that I had a through-hole trace that was causing the problem. That turned out to be not the case either. So I found that one of my connectors here, these little ribbon connectors, of course they have a 10 edge on them, multiple connections as they go into the socket that they fit into, and it appeared that the socket and the connector wasn't making a good connection. So what I did was I took the connector apart and kind of pushed the contacts into itself a little bit so it would bite into the ribbon cable a little better, and we're going to do that to the rest of them. So I will film my procedure for doing that. But as we stand right now, we do have it up and going. We've got the tuning on 88.6. I memorized that in bank number 4 from the presets. And we have a little sound feeder FM modulator, 3.5 cable coming from the laptop into this, and it's just sitting right next to the tuner module, using a screwdriver as the antenna, and it does give us 4 bars of reception here. So got the sound up and going. Let's crank it up a little bit in the mixer here. Turn it back down a little bit, and I also saved some presets of the EQ, and this is how you do this. This is how you switch between, if you want to change the station. If we wanted to do that, we could. There's nothing saved in number 1 but static, so we'll go back to number 4. And then we'll switch back to the EQ, and in bank number 5 should be flat. And then of course we can go to number 1, which is the one I saved. I also saved one in number 2. And that's pretty much it. So now that we've got all of this kind of worked out, I feel comfortable enough that we can go ahead and start getting the cassette mechanism out. That in itself is going to be a little bit of a chore. There's a lot of disassembly involved. That board would have to come back out again anyway. The only problem with taking this board in and out, and I took it in and out about 3 times, maybe 4, is that every time you start manipulating these flexible connectors, there's always the chance, you're running the chance that you could damage one of them. We definitely don't want to do that. So let me go ahead and break it on down a little further, and we'll get the cassette mechanism out and have a look at that and see if we can get that going. But from what I can tell here, we do have front preamp out. I did try the rear's working as well. The balance, all of those controls, everything inside this little control center here does work. It memorizes stations, it memorizes the EQ curves that you set in it. So making some progress. So let's go ahead and get the tape deck out and see if we can figure out what's going on there. So give me a moment for that and we'll pick back up. All right, so before we go any further, let's go ahead, and I went ahead and removed this board back out of the unit again, and I'm going to show you how I fixed that connector to give it a little bit better bite onto the ribbon cable that goes into it. And that ribbon cable goes into this slot right here, and there's one row of pins that basically, if it was a double-sided connector, they would have contact with each other as well as the front side. But in our case, the connector only has one row of pins going from left to right all the way across. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that that connector or the cable is biting into these pins real good. Because over time, age and other things, the connector might bow a little bit, the cable might bow a little bit, and so some of the pins may make a connection and some won't. So I'm not sure what this connector does. It's probably part of the display as well. So the procedure for doing that, you'll need to get yourself a fine pick like this. It's got a nice tip on it. To get this off this piece right here, this was the guard piece that goes down over the top of this. There is a little retainer clip on each side. You'll need to kind of put your probe in there and just slightly push to get the connector off. You'll have to do it on both sides. Make sure you don't break it. In the event that you do break one of the tabs off, it's still usable, but then you have a situation of where you're trying to hold on to this to keep it from falling out of the connector while you're putting the cable back in it. So you want to be careful because I'm sure this plastic is very brittle. But the procedure for doing this, for me, very simple. Take your probe and stick it down between the pin and the outside of the connector and just kind of push inward. You're kind of pushing that direction. And I've kind of went through these and kind of did them a little bit, trying to get them kind of evened up a little bit so they all kind of look about the same. But whatever you do to it is going to be better than it was before because it's been that way for 30, 40 years. So that's kind of the way that I do it. I don't recommend re-tinning the ribbon connector. I mean, that is something that in extreme situations you might be able to get away with, but that brings in a whole nother set of problems in the event that you were to burn that connector up or burn the contact point off that connector. That would be tragic, to say the least. So, but yeah, these are coming along pretty good. I'd already kind of started it before I started the clip up, just so I could kind of get a head start on it. But I think you get the major idea here. You're just kind of pushing these towards that direction. When you get ready to put that cable back in there, it'll have a little bit better bite to it, and that'll probably eliminate any type of intermittent issue you might have. And I'm going to do that to every one of these, or excuse me, I already did it to these. I've already did it to this set, and so I'm going to do it to the smaller set over here. And then that's going to be that. And then you'll notice when you get ready to put the cable back inside this that it'll have a little bit more of a bite to it. It's a little tougher to get it in there, but that's okay. That'll make sure that you don't have any kind of an issue. So you'll just want to make sure that these are all pretty much as close as you can get them to being about the same. You definitely don't want one pushed way over here and another one not so much, because then that one that you pushed too far might hold the one next to it or the one on the other side. It might keep it from making a good connection. So they all need to be about in the same ballpark. If you get one too far, you can just reach down in here and push it back a little bit. That's not a problem at all. And kind of, just kind of get them as even as you can. So there's that. I'll do the other one and we'll get that board finished up. But I'm going to pick back up with you, and we're going to go ahead and finish getting the cassette mechanism out. That was what I wanted to start on next. So give me a moment for that, and we'll pick back up. All right, let's go ahead and come back in. I went ahead and finished up the last connector on the board for the front panel. In an effort to get down to the cassette mechanism, the front panel of this does have to be taken off. I have it right here. There's 2 screws, one on each side, and then a couple of tabs you'll have to release. But before you can do that, you've already taken off these 2 connectors, which is on that board. And actually taking a look at this now, I don't believe you would actually have to remove that board completely. We had to because we were repairing those connectors, but you could just kind of undo the tabs and probably get the board loose enough to get these disconnected, and you could leave the board in with this one still attached. But like I said, we were repairing it, so that's why we took it out. There is a 3rd connector. It's right here. And once you get the face slid off, let's see if I can get you in here. Once you get the face slid off just enough, you can see where this connector goes. There's a connector piece right here for the cable to go into. And of course, you just do the tabs on each side and pull it out. Now, as we're looking at these type of connectors down deep in here, if there's not issues with any of these, we're not going to start taking 3 layers of boards out to redo connectors. We were specifically having a problem with these connectors, one of them in particular, and so therefore I went ahead and redid them all. But unless we experience problems, we're not going to tear these boards out in order to do that. One thing I did want to do when I got this face out is I noticed that the cassette door wasn't buttoned up tight against the front panel, and so I took it apart. See if I can get you in here. And it requires taking this little board out, which I did, and I tightened up the tension on this spring just a little bit, and so that will keep the front door kind of sucked against the front face. So it's got a nice, tight snap to it, or it does when it's, I'm having to tilt it a little bit to get you the camera angle, but when it's setting up flat, it has a nice tight snap to it and sets the way it's supposed to. That door is open and closed automatically. There's a solenoid on the side of the radio right here, and that solenoid has a plunger, and that plunger, of course, is what's responsible for opening and closing the door. After I adjusted the tension, I put the face back on it and just kind of manually moved this with my finger, and that door seems to be fine, so there shouldn't be an issue. So I guess the next step, there's a shield here that has the little speaker on it. I went ahead and unplugged the speaker. I see a few screws. Let's go ahead and just take those out and see if we can get down to where the mechanism is at. Very long screw there, so we definitely want to kind of put this off to the side so we can remember where it goes. And then there's apparently one in the back here. Let's see. Off to the side. And what else is holding it? Maybe one from the side here. Maybe right there. And that's going to release that little assembly too, or at least partially. And then we should be able to get this right out of there. Paying careful attention to this cable over here off to the side. We definitely don't want to create problems there. So we'll set that off here. And then let's see. You can see a screw right here, but I know that there's a flexible connector in the back of this, right behind this preamp board. So the first thing we're going to do is see if we can spin it around. And if I remember right, this board, I believe this board just unplugs. So let's take a look. There's a connector here and a connector right over here. So we should be able to get this out of here fairly easily. So we'll lay that off to the side for a moment. And you can't really see this flexible connector in here until you start getting a little bit more of the mechanism apart, or get it to the point where you can maneuver or move it a little bit. So what we're going to do is start taking the screws out that's holding the mechanism together. There's one right down through here. They give you an access hole through the top of the cassette housing. Again, very long screws holding this in. And that second screw is right here in the front. And as for the third screw, I located it over here by the motor. Let's see if we can get down in there and get that out. Well, maybe that's not it. Let's see. Over off to the back of the motor. I'm trying to do this while I'm looking through the magnifier because everything's so small. That screw's still a fairly long one. Now let's see where we're at. See, it's all pretty much freed up now. Let's spin it back around. There's a wiring harness for the motor that's going to have to be unplugged, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll use a pair of hemostats to access it. And I'm just kind of gripping all the wires right at the base, just kind of rocking on them a little bit. There it comes. No problem, no damage. Now we've got some plugs here we want to be careful of as well. Let's see, is there another screw? There's another screw right here in this. We'll want to take that out, get this board out of the way. Now that that's out of the way, how much more do we have? And there's that ribbon connector right there. And it's a different type of socket. So I think what I want to do is get a little stiffer tool. And again, I'm not sure how much of this you can see because of the angle I got to work at. This would be a connection that would be really easy to damage. So I'm just kind of taking my time with it here. I guess if we flip this up this way, we can probably get a good look at it, maybe. There we go. And there's that. But we're still connected here, probably by the head assembly. So let's get that disconnected, and then we'll be able to take a really good look at this thing. And over here, there's one. Notice we've got quite a few of these red Elna caps here. This is definitely something we'll want to take a look at. Let's see if we have any issues there. And that's it. That frees it up. Now we can really get a good look at this connector here. It's a different style of connector, but basically the same principle. Is this little edge piece goes into the connector, and then of course it just pushes against the contacts. And we're very familiar with this from the other Kenwood that use this type of mechanism. We know there's some motors here, there's some switches that's going to need to be addressed, but clearly the thing that is the most pressing with this is the fact that both belts have turned to goo, and so all of that's going to need to be cleaned up. So there's quite a bit involved here. There's two belts in this mechanism. I didn't find this exact model listed in the PRB book, but I did find a similar model using this type of mechanism. And so I went ahead and pre-bought the two belts. The actual size they call for, I believe, is an SCX 9.1 or a 9.2, Couldn't find that one, so I did get an 8.9. If it turns out to be too snug, then we'll order the right one, but otherwise this should be fine. And then the smaller belt is an SCX 3.5 that goes from under here to the pulley. So got a little bit of work to do on this, and this is going to probably carry over into 2 parts. So I think what we'll do for now is we'll go ahead and leave off the video and just call this a part 1. And of course, we're not going to wait a month for part 2. I'm going to try to have that done next week and have the deck finished up, and we can move on a little further. But at this point, you know, I made it all this time making these videos and never had the battery crap out on me, but that's exactly what happened during the last clip. But I was really just kind of at the conclusion, getting ready to thank you guys for checking out the video this time, as well as all the videos on the channel. Pretty much my usual sign-off lingo. And can't tell you, I'm very excited about trying to get this thing up and going. I'd love to get this tape deck working, get a tape in it, maybe even record a tape to play in it once we got it finished. So as always, I want to thank you guys, and appreciate you checking out the video this time. And we'll pick back up on this one in about a week, at the very latest 2 weeks. But again, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
When the world was virgin, before the coming of men, just a soul, a witness, the beginning of the end. From a world of magma to a cold rock face, the ascent of madness and a human